listening to Development Works, produced by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Hello friends, I'm Andrew Wilson.
And I'm Michael Carlson. This is Development Works for September 2017.
And on today's upcast, how do the pros do international development?
We hear from Patrick Byam, a professional development worker with experience working in high-level development projects all over the world.
Now, Patrick Byam has over 10 years of experience in healthcare and the non-for-profit sector. He spent his entire career building positive change in healthcare delivery in Canada, the US, Ethiopia, China, and the Caribbean. So Patrick holds a Master of Public Health from Yale University, and he's a Master of Health Administration from the University of Ottawa. Today on the Upcast, Patrick lets us know what works in international development.
But first, this Upcast is powered by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. We're a Canadian charity that sponsors the medical education of high-potential youth in rural Nicaragua. If you want to ensure everyone has access to quality healthcare, first visit doctorsfordoctors.ca.
We really need to design projects that, in order to achieve success in a sustainable way. And what that means is that we actively need to collaborate with others to make sure that we have ownership, collective ownership over the outcome. And so how can we do this? We can make sure that we partner with local organizations that have a good understanding of the local context and needs. So I heard about the Canada World Youth Program and participated in the program, which brought together 9 Canadians from all across Canada, 9 people from another country, in this case it was China, and you spend 3.5 months in rural Canada, in this case it was British Columbia, and then you go to the host country, in this case it was China. What you do is you're partnered with a counterpart, and you live in a host family for your time in that community, and you volunteer on a number of issues. So on Vancouver Island, I kind of worked on land conservation, and in China, I primarily taught English. And what I learned from that experience is really, it's important to be open to experience and to be curious about others. And what that really means is like being open to alternative perspectives and different ways of doing things. So like in a lot of Eastern cultures, there's more of an emphasis on the group and the collective. But while in North America, we place a lot more emphasis on the individual. So we're like fiercely individualistic, and we can be fiercely individualistic, and we often have like 1 or 2 leaders who make that decision. And so you can imagine where there's an emphasis on a group as opposed to the individual, there can be conflict. And so what worked really well for us was when we were able to value the alternative perspective and to weigh that while we're making collective decisions. As well, it's important to be cognizant of communication styles. So, in Chinese culture, it's like saving face is really important. So, there's a value placed on indirect communication. While in North America, we have more often we can be like pretty direct and forthright. And so, I think it's important when we're working in other cultures to understand the preferred communication style and alter communication to the audience so that we can be understood. And thirdly, I think that it's important to learn the language. Language is really a gateway to culture and to understanding. And so, I took it upon myself to learn some Mandarin. So I speak Yi Dian Dian Putonghua. Working in international development, there are a lot of the problems are really complex. They're really interdependent, and they require a lot of work together. And by speaking the same language, we can build relationships with our counterparts. And we can, and that generates trust and goodwill, so that when we face the inevitable challenges that come with working in international development, we can have that relationship of trust and underpinning what we do. There's this theory, it's like agency theory, the whole idea is that we want people to have a sense of a feeling that they can change the world. And so in order to do that, you need to involve them in that process to give them a sense of autonomy, make people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and make them feel like they're developing competencies and skills, new skills and abilities. And so when you're thinking about developing a project, think about how you can work with others to build that sense of agency and build that sense of autonomy. So there's this idea of nothing about us without us.
It's a quote that I really liked in this segment, Mike.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's a great mantra to go by in international development. Giving others autonomy is so important for working with people in any capacity. I think that it applies abroad working internationally, but honestly, it also applies here on a work with any team. It even applies work with our volunteers here in Canada.
Now, Patrick also talked about the collective ownership and how important that is for buy-in or trust generally. And that would totally work on any team. It's just another great reminder that trust is the cornerstone to international development. On a side note as well, just have to put it out there, for those that might have never heard of Canada World Youth, you should definitely check it out. I have only heard good things about it. Lots of my friends have done it. It's very different, cool programs, especially for Indigenous youth. There's an Indigenous youth program, and they range in length for 2 weeks to 6 months, and applications are actually soon to be open for next year. So maybe you too could actually go to China like Patrick did.
That's a good point. Now, in this next segment, I want to include this answer to a question I'm commonly asked. How do you train or go to school to become an international development professional? We get to hear Patrick's story here on how he came into his current role.
I started out my career in international development because of a course I took in high school. I was late 90s. I was taking a course in international development, and I was learning about the scourge of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. That was ravaging across the Caribbean and Africa. And as an Afro-Caribbean immigrant, it really resonated with me. And at the time, my teacher said, if you don't do anything about it, who will? And so I took upon myself as a personal challenge to do something about it. And so I was really interested in the sciences, and so I went to McGill and studied psychology and bio with the intent of going into medicine. I realized kind of midway through that, I didn't really want to go into medicine. I wanted to have more of a population impact as opposed to an impact person to person. And so I took some time after university to, I knew I wanted to work internationally, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to make that contribution. You also need to have specific skills to bring to the table. And so I thought about, what are some of my passions? How can I make a contribution and build some skills that would be valuable in an international context? And so I applied to do a Master's of Public Health, and I did a Master's of Public Health at Yale. And so after I finished my Master's of Public Health, I had the opportunity to work with the Yale Global Health Leadership Institute on a number of projects. The first project I worked on was a project with the Clinton Foundation. Ethiopia is one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. Only 10% of women delivered at health facilities. And so this project aimed to increase the number of women who are delivering at health facilities, rural health facilities across the country. And so my role was, I worked at Yale University, and we studied that program to understand, one, what was the impact of the program, how cost effective was it, and if we were to scale this program across the country, how many lives would be saved by this program. After I worked on the project with the Clinton Foundation, I had the opportunity to work on a project with the Ministry of Health in Ethiopia and the Harvard School of Public Health. So Ethiopia wants to become a middle-income country in the next 20 years, and so they're thinking, what do we need to do with our health system to achieve the health outcomes of a middle-income country in the next 20 years? And so what we did is we did help them develop a 20-year strategic plan. So we did a current state assessment. So we interviewed a number of community members, people at health centers, at hospitals, at the kind of regional level, all the way up to the federal level and government partners to understand, what's happening with the health system, what's the status of the health system. We looked at a whole bunch of data to understand where the country was.
After this, Patrick spoke about his experiences in Ethiopia and all sorts of other things, but all of his international development work really started with a personal challenge he made to himself to do something about the HIV and AIDS crisis in the Caribbean.
And I find it interesting that everyone always wants to go into medicine in first year university, but I like that he got out of that game and decided to serve on a more broad level and internationally. It's a very different way to want to give back.
Yeah, different and, certainly less common. I really think at the heart of this is a great lesson that I hope everyone who's still in school just hears loud and true here. So listen up. Just because you're a smart person at science doesn't mean the only useful thing you can do is become a doctor. You can also go into public health. And I guess those are just the two options.
It's still better than an arts degree.
Yeah, there's only one stream in an arts degree.
What? Which one's that, Mike?
The unemployed stream. Boom!
Now, this is a public service announcement for all of those young people with arts degrees.
It may be a common trope to bash arts degrees, but we just want to say here at DFDN and NFN that that's unkind and false.
Yeah, it's actually all university degrees that don't make you any more employable.
Boom! This program is sponsored by the College Programs of Ontario. Not really.
All right. Patrick was a great speaker because he's coming with exceptional experience, Mike. He's the first speaker we had that approached international development from this route of education. And he was really honest about his time and his experiences abroad from his perspective. And what I really liked about Patrick was that even though he approached international development from this perspective, which I'd say is a little higher up, I wouldn't define it as grassroots anyway. He wasn't afraid to really learn the language and make personal relationships. And at the end of the day, he understands that to do this work right, to do international development right, it's about a high level of emotional intelligence too. So thank you very much, Patrick.
For all our listeners, if you want to hear everything that Patrick or any of our other speakers for Development Works say unedited, you can always come to our live recordings at the University of Toronto downtown campus. Check out our website, doctorsfordoctors.ca, to find all the event details. Our Canadian charity strives to do the best international development work possible, and as we continue to learn, we're sharing all of our learnings with you.
And we'd love to hear from you too, so drop us a line on our website if you want to volunteer or get involved.
And now, updates for the month.
In Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses this month, we just heard from our first sponsored medical student in Nicaragua that he is graduating this February in 2018.
Woo!
That's Brian, finishing his 5th year of medical school. And he'll still be entering his final year of what's called his social service year. Now, basically, that's just the Nicaraguan medical school equivalent of his residency at a hospital in Nicaragua. And we also just had a representative get back from Nicaragua this month too, which gives us plenty of work, as it always does, to follow up with our local partners and our medical students.
On our Canadian side, it's back to school madness for our student club at the University of Toronto. The DFD NFN club is looking for new members, so if you are a university student, reach out and learn how to get involved. And I'm very excited about our director's retreat, which is happening right now. It's where we're recording this upcast from, actually. The whole leadership team is getting together to set direction for the year.
And what direction are we heading now, Mike?
We're heading towards success, Andrew. Towards international success.
Actually worked out better than I thought it would.
Thanks.
Well, that does it for this month's update on Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. And for the last word, we hand it back to Patrick, who gives us his answer to the question, what was the best part and the worst part about working in international development?
The most rewarding aspect is the relationships that you make with people around the world. To this day, some of my most meaningful relationships and friendships have been, I now have friends around the world who I've learned a lot about different cultures. And, when I went to China, I had a counterpart and I still keep in touch with him almost 15 years later. And the same with my friends in Ethiopia. And it's also knowing that, work to create programs that have a lasting impact and have the ability to really impact the lives of the strategy in Ethiopia. The health strategy has the potential to impact over 90 million people. So it's a small step that you can make, but it has a large impact. I'd say one of the challenging things is that, a lot of this work is really complex, and there are a lot of interdependencies and things change, and some of the values aren't necessarily shared. So, for example, in Ethiopia, the government now is quite autocratic. And so, I really believe in democratic societies, and a lot of my friends do. And so to work in an environment where, while the country has brought a lot of people out of poverty and improved their livelihoods, not everybody shares in that. And so wrestling the ideas of democracy and kind of Western ideas with how they're implemented in a local context can be pretty it's a process, I guess. It's hard to wrestle with.
And that's everything for this month's episode of Development Works. Thanks for listening.
This is Andrew and Mike signing off, and remember, if you don't make mistakes, you're not working on hard enough problems.